what is the one thing that you would tell agents that why it is that you can transition from an agent to an investor when you're out there just prospecting and doing things? How can they make that transition if a deal is makes more sense as an investment versus a traditional listing?
Well, we'll always tell them to market themselves as an investor first. And I think that's probably the biggest change that those who have experience in agency um, don't, kind of have to grapple with. It's almost like they're kind of having to start over just in terms of their marketing strategy. And so that's probably the biggest transition for them. But as long as you go, you market yourself as buyer and you meet your sellers as a buyer, it's much easier to, get a deal done, an investor deal done, because once you switch to, well, I could represent you. Why don't I represent you in this deal? And why don't we list this property? Then that is where the barrier is in going back to saying
Right.
I can buy the property. Not that you can't do it. It's just a lot more hurdles that you have to overcome. But as long as you're going out there as buyer, you're marketing yourself as buyer, you really don't have to change it.
That is a really good tip to have in mind. I did a video recently on why it is that I believe investors need to have their license. And I put I don't know, I think I had come up with about at least 8 different revenue sources that we've tapped into because John is an agent. Um, and it's just something that I feel it hits on the point that you covered on the last interview that we did, that you said, no matter what crisis is presented, if you're an investor that understands multiple strategies, you'll always be okay, right? And I feel like having a license and being an investor, I mean, what really can't you do at this point?
Yeah, there's not a seller I ever met that I didn't have a solution for. It doesn't necessarily mean they wanted to do that solution.
Yeah.
That was, that we made a deal. But boy, it sure is easier to come away with something. And I remember when we were doing it full time, it was about 2/3 of the contracts we came away with were actually a contract to list, and 1/3 were a contract to buy. That's probably different in different markets, might be different today. But the point being is that, man, that would have been a lot of money to leave on the table.
Yeah.
And I have heard people say, well, why would I want to list property? That's a whole new thing that I have to learn. And I'm like, really? It kind of seems exactly the same as wholesaling. So what you're doing is getting it under contract, just a listing agreement versus a contract. You're marketing it. There's even a system built for you. You just put it in the MLS, and then you're negotiating a contract for sale, and then you're taking it to closing. I don't understand how that's any different than a wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what new skill you think you're going to need to learn. It's all basically the same thing. So why would you not? It's funny. I've talked to one of my agents, Erica Butler. She mentions this a lot, how she'll talk to somebody and they'll say, man, I wholesaled this and made $3,000. And she'll look at them and go, you could have listed that and made $6,000.